Hi, welcome to Cloud Cover. My name's Steve Marks.
And I'm Wade Wegner.
We've got an awesome show for you today. We're going to tell you the tale of Ethan James Wegner.
Who's that?
Well, you see, he was born on Friday.
Saturday.
Saturday?
Saturday morning.
All right. Already the story's wrong. And now he's starring on this week's episode of Cloud Cover.
Where do you go from here, Steve?
Well, we've got a feature that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the brand new, what are we calling it? The Windows Azure Toolkit
for Windows Phone 7.
So we're going to talk about building phone apps with cloud services backing them up.
Yep. We got some news.
We've got some news, of course, at the top, and then we're going to wrap things up with a tip about PowerShell in startup tasks.
Send check or money order to the address on your screen.
All right, let's do the news.
So to start the news, we're going to go to the Interop team, which has released a new plugin for Eclipse.
Yes. So this is, we've already had, there was an SDK for Java for Windows Azure that let you do storage operations and things like that with Java. Now there's a full-blown plugin in Eclipse that has templates that are appropriate for Java development, etc. And so you can get that. It's much less exciting without the background music, isn't it?
It is. I kind of miss it. Maybe we can pull the guitar back out again soon.
Yeah. All right.
When we get to the feature.
When we need
we'll
it.
Intro it again.
But I put it so far away. So anyway, so this is actually a pretty big step forward. This is considered a CTP of the plugin for Eclipse for Java developers. But it's good stuff. Check it out if you're doing Java.
Absolutely. All right, so we're going to also talk to you about another light switch post. So this time, Steve Yee has posted on the SQL Azure team blog his experience using the light switch beta 2 and walks through it and highlights that in just a little time he was able to start with a brand new product he'd never used before and get an application up and running in Windows Azure and SQL Azure. In fact, it's so easy that a caveman or cavewoman can do it.
Yeah, and see, that's actually historically inaccurate because at the time of cave people, only the cavemen were allowed to write computer programs. And so so that's actually, that's a slight, minor mistake by Steve in this post.
Got it.
But this is good as a follow-up to last week where we mentioned Cloud Switch.
It, yep.
But neither of us had actually used it to do something in Windows Azure or with SQL Azure.
And we alluded to a more detailed post coming, which I never saw before we released on Friday. But here Steve has picked it up and walked through the process. So at some point, one of us will give it a try and we'll highlight it. But this is good stuff. So. And next we have how to add MVC3 project types to the Azure Cloud Service Wizard. This is pretty cool.
This is like the 7th way I know how to use ASP.NET MVC3 from a Windows Azure app because I keep making up new startup tasks for it and things like that. But here Jason Haley, who's an MVP, has put together templates that you can actually drop in and get them picked up so that in Visual Studio, when you get that dialog box saying what kind of roles do you want, you can just pick an ASP.NET MVC3
And I'm dying to
role.
know what he's done to modify this, so we've got to dig into it.
And actually, he talks a little bit about it in this post. He shows you kind of with a folder where he drops these in. You do have to go read this post and make sure you follow the instructions because there's a part there where you have to tell Visual Studio to rebuild its template cache, and that actually takes it. I think it said 10 to 15 minutes to do. So make sure you actually, if you're going to try this out, go through the steps and make sure you get it working. But this is kind of cool because we get questions about this because the tools for Windows Azure have not revved since ASP.NET MVC3 was released. The SDK did, but the tools never changed, which means there's never been a template added for MVC3, which means you're always doing the sort of thing I do, which is just create a new project, add it as a role, make some startup task that installs MVC3, or add a bunch of references and make sure they're all copy local. And here, don't worry about it, just do what you would for an MVC2 app, but with MVC3.
I like how he's taken the ASP.NET approach, and he has the web role and then an empty web role as well.
Yes.
And so
not just an MVC3 template do you get here, but 4 MVC3 templates because you get
you also
ASPX,
get the web pages,
HTML, and then either the like website version or the empty project. So
that's awesome.
Pretty cool.
Check it out. All right, so next, I guess this kind of transitions over to our feature.
Yep. And so this is newly released, right?
Yes, actually, yeah. I think like, what does this say? 2 a.m. in the morning. So
2 a.m. in the morning.
I just happened to be sitting up with Ethan. And
for someone with a brand new baby boy, the same as any other time of day.
Perfectly reasonable time to be out doing something.
Yeah, so by the time this show goes live on Friday, this will have been out for a few days, which means you'll probably have seen even more attention paid to it than there is now.
Yep. So what we did is we released a toolkit for Windows Azure that targets Windows Phone 7, and the whole purpose here is I'm saying that if you're building phone apps with Windows Phone 7, we're going to optimize the experience through this toolkit, and we do it by providing a lot of things. In fact, in the blog post, I highlighted. So I'll walk through it here. I mean, certainly I encourage you to just download the toolkit and install it and give it a try. But what we've done is we've created a set of binaries, so assemblies that you can use within your phone application to target things like Windows Azure storage, so getting access to blobs and tables with pretty much, I mean, the exact same semantics that you use with the Windows Azure storage client library. So if you're familiar with the storage client library, it's not going to be any different from the phone. So we provide essentially a storage client library for the phone, and then some additional assemblies to provide things like membership capabilities, so authentication and authorization as well. So we ship those binaries. We've got a lot of documentation. A dependency checker, which is if you've ever used any of the toolkits or the training kits and so forth that we release, we've got a dependency checker that makes sure that you have all the necessary prerequisites in order to leverage the toolkit. So making sure you've got the Windows Azure SDK, the tools, the Windows Phone 7 tools installed, Visual Studio, all that good stuff. Even the appropriate modifications made to IIS in order to get things to run. We also include a bunch of project templates, and this is some of the neatest things that I'll show on the show. And essentially, we have a bunch of V6 or Visual Studio extensibility files that create new project templates that you can use to create a brand new project that includes all the bits already laid down. And then we also have a sample application as part of it as well. So, pretty thorough toolkit. This is our first release of it, specifically targeting storage and membership. And I gave some information at the end of the post of some of the scenarios that we're also looking to target in the near future. So definitely take a look at that. And I mean, if anyone has additional requests,
and
definitely let me know.
The architecture for all this stuff is there's a Windows Azure application running in the cloud, and that's where stuff like requests to membership things like login stuff will go, and that proxies the storage request, right? And that's important because we've talked in the past on the show, I think, about the need to keep your storage keys secret. And so what you can't do is build a phone app where you've just embedded the storage keys, because someone can crack that open, find your keys, and then go delete everybody's data or something like that. That model is okay if you have an app where the person who owns the app also owns a storage account. Then they can plug in their key and they can use it, and that's totally reasonable.
And I mean, it's a supported scenario as well. So you can, if you wanted to, you can leverage everything that's part of this toolkit along with the storage key on the client. However, out of the box, all the tooling is built around the concept of having a trusted subsystem running up in Windows Azure that's proxying the requests. So if I go to access blobs, what I will do is first I'll make a request to the set of services, and I'll have to present a token that says I have access to it. And this token comes from our membership services that are also hosted in Windows Azure. When I present this token, what it'll do is it will actually create a shared access signature that it sends back to me that gives me the ability to interact directly with blob storage. So the shared access signatures work great in this regard. For tables, you don't have that concept of a shared access signature. So we literally proxy the request. We don't transform it. All we do is you'll make the request against our table service proxy, and in the request header is the token that we need in order to authenticate you against our membership services. Once we've accepted that and we've validated that you have a valid token, then we generate the authorization token needed by the actual table service.
So web request comes in, it's got a different kind of authorization, it just has the token. You sign everything and slap on the new authorization header, and then just pass everything along.
So it's a very simple proxy, so we don't transform anything in any other aspect of the message whatsoever. So, which means that, from the phone client, you construct the request the same way that you would from any other client.
So it sounds to me that if you have this stuff running as a service in the cloud, Windows Phone 7 isn't the only client that you could make. I mean, in theory, you could use a desktop client to do this, but I'm also thinking about the other mobile devices.
What other mobile devices?
I hear there's some sort of robot thing, and then there's there's something orange from a company, grapefruit. It's some sort of fruit.
Right.
But there are these other devices, and I wonder. I mean,
Real
the
quick, people
patterns
are going to think we're specifically avoiding the name. So
Android and
iPhone, yes.
and iPad. Actually, really,
yep,
iOS is the bucket there.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the services running in Windows Azure, they're just REST services.
Yep.
They speak OData, so it's no different from the normal table service API. And so absolutely, any client can interact with it. We don't specifically provide tooling in our toolkit for those platforms, something we're thinking about, but this release is specific to Windows Phone 7. But certainly, I mean, that's the real value of having Windows Azure providing these services, both from a storage perspective as well as a WCF service or some kind of service running up in the cloud, as well as it opens it up to any platform device.
Right, and it's just REST. So I mean,
REST.
You could go build these things yourself, or you could put in your vote with Wade and team and say, we really want to see this. We want to see something built for us for Android or for iOS, and as Wade said, it's something being considered. So.
Yep. Yeah, and your feedback, as well as telling us the value of the toolkit once you try it, certainly helps us to prioritize. So, well,
let's see it. Yeah.
So one thing. So what I'll show you is, if you come to, I got to remember what it was called. We've got this up in Codeplex. So WA toolkit wp7.codeplex.com.
That's how it's pronounced.
WA sounds appropriate given
given the sounds you were probably listening to
babies.
As you were publishing this.
So we've released this up in Codeplex. I have done my best to provide a lot of documentation. A lot of the toolkits that get released, you get a nice little splash screen, and then you're on your own from there, right? And so from here, here's kind of an introduction to it. If you go to documentation, I've provided a set of setup and configuration steps to understand what are some of the prerequisites and dependencies, highlight everything that's in there from a content perspective. One thing I'd like to point out here as well is we didn't want to optimize just for the professional or ultimate versions of Visual Studio. So we do support, with the toolkit, the Express versions for Windows Phone 7 as well as the Web Developer Express. One thing to note, and the challenge here is, if you can look at this table that we published, the Windows Azure tooling for Visual Studio is not supported by the Visual Studio 2010 Express for Windows Phone.
Right.
And the Windows Phone tooling is not supported by the Web Developer Express. Right. So what that means is, to use the toolkit or to get this to work at all, you need to have both installed, first of all. But we have two separate solutions. We have a solution that's for the Windows Azure tools, and then we have a version that's for the phone tools as well. So everything still works.
Both open. You'll run each. You'll run the service, and then you'll run the phone client. And
not ideal, but it's not a blocker. So I mean, it certainly works.
And of course, if you do have Visual Studio Professional, or I mean, if you have one of those versions of Visual Studio, then you get to put it all together into one thing.
And we still provide the Visual Studio extensibility files for each of these, so you still get the nice new project templates and so forth.
Great.
It's just the fact that you have to have two different IDEs open for it.
Yep.
And then probably most importantly, we have a pretty exhaustive getting started page that walks through the entire process, kind of a happy path through the entire application.
A happy path. I like that.
Yeah. It makes you happy.
That's the name of the song I was playing earlier on the guitar. It's called Happy Path.
Nice. All right. So from here, what I recommend is just download the bits. So go ahead and download it. We'll save it. Let's just make sure we save it to my desktop. And it'll take a few seconds. We also have all the source code embedded right here within Codeplex. Honestly, in the package, in the download, we also include the source code.
Okay, right.
So you can grab it on TFS if you want, or via TFS or some other source control client up here if you want, or you can just leverage what's here. When you get it, you just go ahead and run. I've already run. So I may get a couple of so let me choose a new location.
Put it somewhere else.
Yeah. What this does is it's a self-extracting. It's WinRAR self-extracting. So it's just dropping a bunch of bits onto the computer. Nothing gets registered. Nothing gets installed.
Okay.
Makes it easy, nice and easy. And from here, this is where you can start the setup, the dependency checker, and walk through the process of making sure you've got everything installed and you're ready to go. So I'll go ahead and run setup. Start the wizard. And first thing it's going to do is check to make sure that everything that I need is installed. If something is missing, we put a little link off next to it that'll allow you to go grab the resource. So it makes it pretty easy. In many cases, it just launches a WebPI script that installs stuff. Then the last step is where we launch and register the actual Visual Studio extensibility file, which gives us the project templating in our application.
Right. And this will do each of them depending on what I installed this, or at least an earlier version of this before, and had I think 3 different Visual Studios that got the extensions separately, because there's the phone, if you have the Express edition for phone, if you have Visual Web Developer Express, if you have Visual Studio Professional or Ultimate, or each one of those has its own extensibility package, and they all you just run startup and they all happen, right?
Yeah, so here, if I open up Visual Studio, we can take a look to see where this is. So if I come to Tools, Extension Manager, you can see now I've got the Windows Azure Toolkit for WP7.
Yep.
And if you ever need to uninstall it for whatever reason, here it is. If you get an update, you don't actually have to uninstall first. You can just reinstall it, and it'll just install over it. So pretty easy. So now that that's installed, I can come here to create a new project, and you'll see under Cloud, I've got 2 new template types here. I've got the Windows Phone 7 Cloud application, and then I've got an empty Cloud application. So we've also mimicked the ASP.NET model, which I think is really nice, because in the Windows Phone 7 Cloud application, we include our sample app. So literally from it, I can create a new project, get things started, hit F5, and I've got an application that I can start, working against.
And then sometimes it's easier to just modify something that works instead of starting from scratch.
And it's also nice because it shows you exactly how to leverage all the APIs that we built for it. So you get a good example right from the new file experience. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why having an actual application in the ASP.NET MVC or web form project is nice as well, because you get that initial scaffolding, you get to see how some stuff works, and get a starting point. But if you do want just a brand new Windows Phone 7 application without our sample app there, we give a project template. But what we also do along with that project template is we've slipped in our assemblies so that the storage client library assembly is already there for you to work directly against.
Right.
And we also include the Windows Azure web role that has all the services running. So it still gives you that really nice starting point, but just a brand new phone application experience.
Cool.
So let's go ahead and create a new one. Now, we've also put a wizard in here. So initially what we do right now is we ask you to enter some storage information. So I can put my account name and key in here, or to make it really simple, I can just choose to use the storage emulator, and that way I get the full local laptop experience. What I'll note though, when you are putting in your storage information, this information is not going into the client. Again, this is going into the Windows Azure web role, because that's our secured location. The storage account name, the storage key aren't bubbled up or made available to anyone. So I don't want you to think that we're putting it on the phone here. We actually put it in the Windows Azure.
And if I say to use the storage emulator, and later I want to change to use some storage in the cloud, that's in csconfig, or
so you would update. Let me show you. So I'll go ahead and click OK. It's going to create 3 projects in the solution. Also, if you get a chance, most people don't like to read documentation. Just glance at it. There's a lot of good information.
Immediately
here.
click
You
the
immediately
X.
close it.
There's
Okay.
no.
So, but there is documentation in here. So
I already didn't read the documentation on the website where I downloaded it. Why am I now going to have to read the documentation again?
So a couple of things to note. In service definition, we have a couple of things here. The first thing to note is we have a couple of endpoints, specifically port 443 and 10 or 180. The reason we have these is all our services are running on under HTTPS, so we have to have 443 set up as an endpoint. Also, when you're running locally, we have to use a certificate for HTTPS, and it's a self-signed cert, so it's not something that is inherently trusted by the phone client.
Right.
And so the very first thing we have to do from the phone, and I'll show this in a minute, is install that cert onto the phone. And that's because until we get that cert installed and it trusts the certificate being served up by IS, the phone client won't connect to our services. So that's why we have these 2 endpoints here. The 180 is literally just a mechanism for us to serve up the certificate.
So it's a way for you to get the certificate
onto the phone. Exactly. And the reason we've chosen this port is there's less opportunity for that, collision in that port number.
Right.
So a lot of people have port 80 already set up and bound to something in IS. You may very well have 443 set up and bound to something too. And we do have a troubleshooting guide where if you encounter these type of issues, we can help you get around it. But that's one of the first things to note here. And then from a configuration perspective, you'll see we do have right now the data connection string.
Right. So that's where I would change it. If I changed my mind after I went through that wizard, it's no big deal. It's just like any Windows Azure app. You just go in and change the config setting, which you could also do through the UI. If you double-clicked on the role, you could change the setting there.
I never do that, though.
I always do that.
You do that?
You know what? I do that for config settings in particular. It's not that one, actually. It's the if you click settings on the left.
Sorry.
Yeah. I do it here because it has this it checks the syntax of the connection string. Like you can say the type is connection string and then hit the ... and then just put in the account and key, and it forms the string correctly.
Oh, nice.
Because otherwise I type the wrong, I put default endpoint protocol equals HTTP instead of endpoints.
This is what you're talking about here. You just,
Yeah, you just put it there and then
simple.
Visual Studio makes sure that you got that right instead of, because otherwise every once in a while I spell something wrong.
I think you sold me.
All right. I convinced Wade my work here is done. Great. So we have the Windows Azure project.
Yep.
We have the web role I see over there, and then a phone client. Right?
Yeah. So the Windows Phone 7 Cloud App 1.services. That's our web role.
Yep.
I'll quickly give you a look here. Let's get rid of this guy. So there's a bunch of stuff in here. One thing I'll note is, as it exists today, there's very little you need to do to change in these services. They're extremely flexible. So, and that's one of the values of the Windows Azure storage in and of itself is the fact that, like tables aren't, strongly typed or, they're very loosely defined. So from a services perspective, we can just accept the table structure as defined on the phone client and pass it through. So very little should need to be changed in the web role itself.
Right. So this just has those APIs for membership and for passing through to storage. And those use whatever account you've set up there, and then there's no model or no schema that you have to set up for any of that, which means, you might not have to touch this at all, which is pretty cool.
Which is nice, yeah.
Yeah.
But
especially for if you're a phone developer. A lot of the people watching this are probably comfortable with the Windows Azure side of things and building their own services and et cetera. But if you're just a phone developer who needs a service, you need storage in the back end or you need membership or something, this way there's minimal work that you have to do to get that up and running within Windows Azure.
Yeah, and that's the goal here. We don't want to have to force a phone developer to initially and immediately learn a whole bunch of stuff about Windows Azure. We'd love for them to learn it over time, but we want that entry point to be as simple as possible.
Right.
And so from a phone perspective, you can see we've got the phone client. We reference here's our assembly. So this is the storage client library that we've built out that wraps all the REST calls to the storage service, handles authentication, all these types of things. We've compiled it down to an assembly and referenced it. Now, if you want to look at the full source, you can. In fact, if you come here to samples, we've got C# and VB samples. And if you come to the C#, or either one of them, you'll see here this is the storage client. Here's all the classes, and here's the project that's being used. So you can absolutely take a look at how we interact with the storage service.
Great.
Well, let's go ahead and we'll go ahead and run it and show the local dev experience. When you hit F5, it's going to do two things. It's going to launch the phone emulator. The resolution just does not work particularly well. We can work with it.
Yeah, you'll see everything you need to.
And then it's also going to launch the compute emulator as well. Compute emulator is going to run all of our local, Windows Azure web role services, and then from the phone app is we're going to communicate to those services. So let's give it a second to start up. Now, there is a web experience, and we also are communicating over HTTPS, and since it's the self-signed cert, you'll get this warning. What's nice about a browser is the browser you can choose to ignore the warning.
Yes.
The challenge is on the phone, you can't. So that's why we need to install the cert. So let's park this for a moment and come here to the phone client. And you see I've got the app installed. It's got a really pretty logo. I like the logo. And we'll go ahead and open it. So the very first thing you need to do is install that cert, or else you're not going to be able to communicate to the services at all.
Right, because everything else happens over HTTPS, and it happens for a reason, because you're sending things like usernames and passwords and actual data for storage and tokens. And it's a good idea to protect that stuff with SSL.
So by default, the tooling always communicates over HTTPS. Now, there certainly could be use cases where you have something in blob storage that's public that you don't need. You could build a phone app that you're just leveraging storage and blobs and CDN or something like that. That's fine. That's great. You probably won't need to use SSL or anything like that.
But for anything that's authenticated and whatever that involves passing credentials around.
So I'm going to go ahead and click Install Cert. You'll see here's where it's hitting 180.
Right.
And I'm going to tap to open the cert. Going to click Install. Yay, it's been installed. And then when it's done, I'm going to come back to my app. Now, one thing that's nice is, as long as I keep the compute emulator, or the phone emulator running, I don't have to install that cert again.
Right.
So if I make some changes and redeploy, as long as that emulator is up, I don't have to reinstall the cert. But anytime I close it and then open it up again to run the app, I need to install the cert again.
And if you deployed to the cloud using a self-signed cert, it's probably not a very good idea. But if you did that as part of your testing of this and you deployed to staging and you're using that same self-signed cert, and then you use an actual phone to connect, you'd again just have to do it once, right? Because once the certificate's installed and trusted on the phone, then the rest of the communication just works. And,
Absolutely.
So great.
Yeah, and when you do that, and I can always point to it, I actually recommend taking that cert and putting it somewhere else like blob storage. It makes it even easier because it doesn't depend on the deployment state of your application. Just throw that cert up into storage, and you can modify it in the app XAML file. At any rate, so now that that's there, the very first thing we need to do is create an account, create a new account. So come to the emulator. If anyone didn't notice, I hit page up. That actually drops away the on emulator keyboard and lets me use my keyboard to type. We're going to call this guy Cloud Cover. And we have an email address, cloudcover@. We don't actually, but I'm just pretending we do.
That's so dangerous to type that, because now people are going to email that address. We should go create it.
We should create it. We should actually have one. Yep. Okay. Well,
that might exist.
It might exist in a few days.
Otherwise, a bunch of people are going to try and get bounces.
All right, and then I'm going to register. This is calling our authentication services. It's passing that information and creating the user. So that's great. So I go ahead and click OK, and comes back here to the login page, and I can log in.
And that all used the membership. That's what that membership stuff was for in the service.
So if you come back here, you'll see this authentication service right here.
Right.
And so that authentication service handles things like logins, account registration, user creation, and so forth. So now I can actually log into the application. Type my password.
I saw that. That was totally just password.
It was.
That's what Wade uses for all his. Go ahead and log into his blog and post things.
So now that I've logged in, the sample application has a number of things that we're highlighting. We can list out tables, show an example of data within a table. We can list out blobs and the like. Now, you'll note on each one of these pages, I've got this error message that says, error, you have no permission to use tables. That's because by default, we don't, notice how I didn't wait for you to be, like an administrator didn't give me access or accept my request to register.
Anyone could do that registration.
Anyone could do that. So by default, again, we don't want to just give people, access to everything without somehow validating it. And so I have no access at the moment, but this is where the website comes back into play. So if I come back to the web app, here I can log in as an administrator, and very secure. Just in the sample, we give you the credentials. Change it. I mean, don't use this and deploy this to production with this stuff, right?
Make sure you fix that.
But when you're sleep deprived like I am right now, having this right here is really nice.
It's even copy pastable on that page.
It is.
That's very handy.
So I can log in. From here now, we can start granting access to this users for various things. So
this might differ. As you went and deployed this, you might have a totally different mechanism, I think, for how you grant permission. Could be that everyone who registers does get some sort of permission, but only to a subset, only to everything that starts with their username or something like that. And that's logic that you will have to go decide on and go apply, but the sample leads you in a good path of showing how all the permissions are set up and how they're created. And
I'm really interested in feedback on this point. Like, do people think it's natural for the sample to start off with this way, or should we change it so that by default maybe we just give everyone access? I wanted to err on the cautious side,
Yeah.
be a little cautious here.
Err on the side of giving them a sample
caution.
where it has the username and password for the admin on a web page
Yeah.
that everyone can hit. Yep, it's a good cautious way to go.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. All right. At any rate, so I can come in here and start granting permissions to
Yep.
resources. And so what's nice about this model is we're not only demonstrating authentication, but we're also demonstrating authorization, right? Because again, this is one storage account, but I am providing some granular level permissions on top of tables here. So I can say for my Cloud Cover user, give it access to albums, give it access to membership. Actually, I'm just going to give them access to everything.
Sure, it's Cloud Cover. We trust Cloud
We trust
Cover.
everything, yes. So we'll do that. And then for user permissions as well, let's go ahead and give him access to create tables as well as create blobs.
Okay.
And so that should cover us. So now, go ahead and log back in.
Was that some like Ajax magic? You never had to push save or anything?
Well, honestly, it's possible. I didn't want to do it and have it fail, but theoretically, I should have been able to just pan off, and it would have updated, because we do a refresh against the service with each pan. But I didn't want that to not function. See how confident I am.
Lovely.
So table list, I'm pretty sure it would have been fine.
Yeah.
Table list, you can see here's all the tables now that I have access to. In fact, I can go ahead and create one. To keep it simple, we just hash it with time, and I can delete it as well. So what's nice about this again is we're demonstrating how against the API to create tables, delete tables, and here is a table that exists, sample data. We're showing you how to create rows within tables as well. So you can see here we're surfacing up things like the partition key, the row key. We give you some defaults, but I can end up saying
this
sample,
name, description, and number. I mean, that's just you'd create your own
Yes.
classes that you'd use in the client.
Yep.
That would define exactly what.
Go ahead and
what
save
you're
it.
saving.
And now you can see here's my sample name, description 100, and then the date. So we have the ability to create new rows, and then I can even come here and edit it if I want, or delete it. So pretty nice.
Cool.
Also blobs. So I can list out blobs. I think we may have a pretty... Okay, nothing's here. Great. Oh, I'm going locally. That's why. What I'm going to do is take a picture. Now, on the emulator, you don't get the most compelling
really
pictures.
lame pictures. Yeah.
It's basically a box with a white box with a black box in it.
Yep.
I'm going to go ahead and accept it, and you can give it a name.
Yep. Like, awesome box I just saw. Check it out. That's what I think it's for.
I didn't want to put a...
Steve's funny.
And we've
Don't
just
lie to the
uploaded.
people like that.
And now let's go here and list it out. And there's the picture. Steve's funny.
Yep. So this could be really compelling, and I mean, there are plenty of apps that involve taking pictures and storing them safely on a server somewhere and letting other people look at them.
Or even take a picture and put it into a public container. I mean,
Yep.
the example here again is using a private container, but there's nothing preventing you from making it a public container and giving people access to it.
Cool.
So that's the sample now.
Looks great.
What's nice is we can also do this from the phone as well. So what I wanted to do, let me go ahead and shut this down. And I've got another version set up here. So let me go ahead and launch this. And actually I'm just going to launch this one. This actually is running against some production services. So this is, yes, stop the deployment. There we go. So this is running against the services I actually have deployed to Windows Azure, which means that from my phone device right here, I can interact with those services and play with them. So what I wanted to demonstrate was the ability to actually take a real picture and then show it.
So the emulator's up, but that's not. But for a moment, you're going to use.
For a moment, I'm going to use
the
this.
actual app that you've deployed to your phone.
So 1 second as I log in, and it's a very.
He's typing password. I can see it. Oh, it wasn't. It wasn't actually, was it? Was it password? It looked close. I couldn't tell from this angle.
And I'm going to take Steve's picture. Now we tried this earlier, and this camera takes funny pictures. Yeah, it still didn't turn out that well. But
it's a weird lighting environment, I think, to try to take a picture.
It is, yeah. So let me give it a name, Steve.
Why do you name all your blobs Steve something?
You know, I don't
know if I don't know how I
And
feel
all
about
right,
that.
so that's been uploaded. So now, from the emulator, I'm going
And
to
so that actually hit the cloud, right?
That actually hit the cloud.
So
So that deployed it to
Right.
an actual storage account, utilizing services running in Windows Azure.
Right. So this is all stuff you deployed before.
Yep.
You deployed that to the cloud. You put something on the phone.
Yep.
Now we're just running the emulator, but still pointing to the
Still
cloud.
pointing to the cloud.
Which means
so when I log in,
should be able to see
I should
this.
be able to see it.
We'll see
So let's
how,
come here to
how well the
list out
picture
blobs.
came out.
And I think there's a bunch in here. So we'll let it paint. Actually, you know what we can do? We can be sneaky here, and I'm going to prefix it so that we can filter it
Ooh,
out.
you can actually filter. How many do you have? In
I
there?
have quite a few. Let's see. No blobs found. Oh, did I do? I think maybe I did capital.
I think, yeah. This should be case
There we go.
sensitive because blob storage is.
Yep. So there's Steve. Oh, and you're crooked. You're tilted.
I am crooked. Thanks, Wade.
There's Steve. Here, wait. What if I rotate this?
You can rotate.
I want to rotate that
way.
There
Yeah.
we go. Look at that handsome guy.
That's me. Very cool. So that's the end-to-end. That's what it actually looks like
Yeah.
when it's deployed on a phone,
Yep.
deployed to the cloud. Pretty easy to do, and that's all. This is just the sample app, right?
It's just the sample app.
So
Nothing modified in
You
it.
can just download, if you want to do this, all you have to do is download it, F5, make sure everything's working locally, put
Yep.
in a real storage account,
Yep.
real key, go deploy the app, and then if you've got a phone, whatever, you can deploy the app to the
Yeah.
phone as well, and you'll have the same experience up in probably like less than half an hour of work, even including waiting for
Yeah.
the deployment to go up.
It's really quick. I mean, if you
That's
put in
great.
the storage account information, you can, once you've created the new project, you can take that web role and almost without any changes, to go ahead and deploy it up into Windows Azure within 10 minutes or so. That's running, and then update your phone client to point to your production services. So whatever your app.cloudapp.net ends up being, and
Just put
up and
that in the
running.
config.
Yep.
Great.
And it's pretty easy to deploy onto the phone if you've got a dev unlocked phone. So if
Yep.
you're actually doing mobile app development for Windows Phone 7, and amaze your friends.
That's what it's all about. It's all about amazing your friends. Okay, with that, I think we should flip over to our tip of the week.
All right.
So, Bob, maybe you can put something in about the tale of Ethan James Wegner, and just keep in mind that this kid is going to have to watch this video at some point, like 10 years from now. So, be kind. But
And my wife is going to probably watch
she's
it
gonna
as
watch it
well.
sooner.
So be kind. be kind for me, my sake.
okay, and with that, here's your tip of the week.
When you wish upon a star, makes no difference who you are. Anything your heart desires will come to you.
And we're back. So I wanted to give a quick tip about PowerShell and startup tasks. Specifically, really, the tip boils down to install SDK 1.4 because there was a race condition in SDK 1.3 with, I think it's really with the remote access plugin, where to run a PowerShell command from a startup task, unless you have a signed PowerShell script, you're going to set the execution policy first to unrestricted so that you can just run your script. The remote access plugin in Windows Azure installs some PowerShell stuff, and in the process of doing that, it changes the execution policy and then changes it back. And that's happening as a background task while your task is running. So it could be that you set the execution policy to unrestricted, but then we sneak in that remote access policy and set it back right before you ran your code, and then your script never actually gets to execute. Yeah. If you've done everything right, you probably just fail your startup task and everything reboots and it tries again. So it's not the end of the world, but it's a little bit annoying and it makes it kind of hard to do this right. If you get SDK 1.4, there's no issue. And so what I recommend is you get SDK 1.4 and then you use these. Is there a zoom? Okay, great. You use these two lines. The first one just says, hey, PowerShell, set the execution policy to unrestricted. And the second one actually launches the PowerShell script that you want to. So.
Yep.
I always have a batch file in my startup task that has like these 2 lines of code at least to go launch PowerShell. And if you're using SDK 1.4, this is a totally safe way to do it, and it works both with PowerShell 1.0 and PowerShell 2.0. I was
going to ask if it worked with both of the OS families.
Because actually with PowerShell 2, you get to say PowerShell -execution policy unrestricted, and then run the thing. So you can do it all with one line. And that's actually a much nicer, cleaner way to do it if you know that you're going to have PowerShell 2.0, which means you're using OS Family 2 to get Windows Server 2008 R2 instead of SP1. And so if you are doing that, and this is just your project where you know you have that setting, that's actually better. I would do PowerShell -execution policy unrestricted, and then the script. But this will work in both. This works equally well in both cases. And so for general purpose startup tasks that you might use in different projects or you might share with somebody else, I think this is the most robust way to make things work.
Awesome.
And that's it. That's so the tip is really do get 1.4. Now it's been out for what, a week and something now or whatever, and I haven't seen any issues come up, so I'm feeling pretty confident. You should go pick it up. Fixes a number of bugs, including this little race condition, and so you will be happier if you get that.
Great.
And so with that, we should I'll play us out maybe, and we'll just do. So as always, thanks for joining us on Cloud Cover. If you'd like us to cover something that you haven't seen on the show, or if you'd like us to revisit something you have, please send us a tweet to @CloudCoverShow. The word tweet belongs in every guitar song like this, I think. And until next time, we'll see ya.
Thanks.